Good afternoon and welcome to one of our webinars this afternoon. Hope you're doing very well wherever you are and you're off to an excellent Monday morning. Today I'm going to be speaking about the role of standards and the International Organization for Standardization. My name is Kilian Songwe. I am the President and Chief Scientific Officer at the Global Healthcare Public Foundation. I welcome you to sit back, relax, and enjoy this. We're going to be looking at the role of standards and the International Organization for Standardization, commonly referred to as ISO. So the role of ISO is what we want to look at today. And I'm going to be looking at management systems, some of the technical committees that are involved with the ISO. And I'll give you two examples from one of the processes that the ISOs use. So just Standardization is an independent non-governmental body to share knowledge, develop voluntary. That's the key word here. It's the develop voluntary consensus standards that will support innovation and standardization. And then moving on into the next year, just like here, okay, I'm sorry, I'm lost you a little bit, 74-year history. And in 1946, ISO officially comes into existence with 67 technical committees. And we're going to look at these technical committees very soon and what they use. So generally, there are 5 category memberships, 3 categories of membership. There is, first of all, the full members. Basically, full members, they have voting rights and they are part of the discussions on the different standards, and they develop Then we have the corresponding members who do not participate in any of the debates or any of the technical committees, and they do not sell or adopt ISO standards internationally for their home countries. I threw in this map here just for us to be able to take a quick look at the different member states, member bodies, and corresponding members. If you look at the African continent at the moment, that's where a lot of the corresponding members are. You look at the Americas, North and South America, 1, 2, 3, about 4 different correspondent members. And then there is the big block of Asia, and then there is the Middle East and North Africa, and then there is Sub-Saharan Africa with a very good mix of member bodies and correspondent members. So when you look at that, and then there is also the subscriber members. So the subscriber members, as I said earlier on, do not have access to being able to adopt and or sell the standards in their different countries. So I threw this in because ISO, this is just to be able to give a feel as to all the things that ISO does. It actually develops strategy, and this is one of the ones it's working on, the ISO Action Plan for Developing Countries. There has always been, or there continues to be a complaint or a discussion around how do we get standardization to developing countries. So ISO actually put together a 5-year plan, the 2016 through 2020, which happens to be this year, by the way, but a lot has actually been achieved on the ISO action plan of things that have to be done. That is, so the ISO is, the ISO action plan for developing countries is actually nearing its completion this year. And so there is a lot of things that developing countries can now do to be able to standardize to the different standards that are out there. I'm very sorry, I get information that the internet might be very shaky, so I'm going to have to change my internet for a second. So just bear with me 1 second and I'll change my internet. I'm very sorry about that. I hope, I just changed my internet host. I hope this is much better. So as I was saying, the ISO action plan for developing countries, it's actually been a great development from the International Organization for Standardization, because this allows for developing countries to be able to reap some of the spoils and benefits for having a standard system to work with. When we look at the ISO action plan for developing countries, there is a clear strategy, there's a clear structure and terminology. I just looked at just the very first level where it talks about the impact. It talks about contributes to economic development and social progress. The economic development and social progress of developing countries is very key if you are going to take goods to markets. One of the biggest challenges that we have on developing countries is how they can take food products to market. So if you have a standardized system, that it just makes it so much easier for every country to be able to process in the same manner, the same way, and be able to take their goods to market. So that's a big impact thinking about the standard. So there is also what is known as the technical committees, experts that represent every sector imaginable. And we're going to look at the different number of technical committees. There is a good number of them. And we're talking from things like soap all the way to spacecraft, or from the MP3 player to coffee, which is one of my favorites. That's why actually I've been noted. In fact, there are more than 250 technical committees, and I'm going to share with you some of them and how they're actually formatted to do the work that they do. In most cases, the experts that the ISO committees have brought together develop ISO standards for work in the different fields in which they are in. So these are people with expert knowledge for the different fields in which they actually work in. And they're not isolated professors just talking about theory. They actually understand and anticipate the challenges of their different sectors. So that is really key, that they can understand the sector, they can anticipate the challenges in the sectors that can be used very easily by different people in different countries. So this is just a very small section, as is mentioned here. The technical committees, there are 253 technical committees for the ISO, for the International Organization for Standardization. And what I did here is I just took randomly, I just selected a few, just so that we could actually see what is going on here. So there is the ISO TC for Technical Committee 86, which basically works on refrigeration and air conditioning. They've published 36 that are under development at the moment. They have 21 that are under development. So this is actually very key work that the technical committees do. There is a TC 92 for fire safety. They have published 144 standards, and they have 40 under development. So the technical committees are actually very key to the work that the International Organization for Standardization does in terms of bringing all these experts together to be able to think about how can they standardize elements that are happening. There is a lot of construction going on all over the globe today, and there is a technical committee, TC 96, that works on cranes. And imagine it or not, they've come up with 108 standards around cranes, and they still have about a of the ISO technical committees, the titles that they go by, how many standards they have published to date, 2020, and how many more they are actually working on. Because this is very important information for all the different fields that are out there. So for almost any field you can think of, there's most probably a technical committee guide or standard that could be used in the work that you do. Then there are other bodies that help, the International Organization for Standardization, as they develop their standards and or guides. And I'm looking here at the CIE, the International Commission on Illumination. That's one that most people know. Or the when the body comes out to assess you, they have by the ISO CASCO or management board groups. This is an important one because we'll see the relationship between the technical committees and the TMB and how they report into the whole overall policy and structure. Then there is the ILTUTS, the International Union. This is another really great one. All of these all together support the other technical committees that we've seen. And I actually threw in this slide because I could not be more proud. Eddie Joroge, the International Organization for Standardization, and Eddie comes from Kenya. Actually, Kenya just happens to be the country of my birth. That's why I'm so proud of him. Glad to be able to show him here. The ISO actually has 6 members, and Eddie happens to be its president, and 2021 just shows when his term of office actually expires. So when you look at the structure and governance for the International Organization for Standardization, this is basically what you have here. You have in the midsection of the slide, you have the President's Committee, you have the Council on Standing Committees, which is some of the people that that are actually not part of the TC, but they're just other groups that provide guides. Then you have the advisory group. Then there's the Policy Development Committees, CASCO, DEFCO, and all of these feed into the council. So you have the Central Secretariat, and their work feeds into the council that also feeds into the General Assembly. Remember, I just spoke earlier on about the technical committees, and all the technical committees reports to the Technical Managing Board, which in turn also reports to councils, and everything is taken to the General Assembly. Of course, ISO has its headquarters in Geneva, and they meet once a year to discuss and arrange agreements on all of the standards as they come up through. So what are the benefits? There is so much that is said, and as I said, 253 different standards are out there, 253 technical committees helping to develop numerous standards for people to be able to use. And we're looking at what are the benefits for having all of these standards? Is that ISO was founded with the idea of answering a fundamental question. What's the best way of doing this? That's such a very poignant question. What's the best way of doing this? And so when you get a couple of experts in the field with expert knowledge and they come together, they can actually discuss the best way of doing this, and they come up with a standard which can now be used. The international standards means that customers can have confidence in their products, that their products are safe, reliable, and of good quality. That's the benefit of having a standards organization, and that's the benefit of having the standards out there. So you have the ISO standards on road safety, toy safety, that's a really big thing, toy safety, secure medical packaging. These are just a few of the important things that the ISO standards do for the general public. But I love this, I really love this phrase. It says, better business, better regulations, better products and services. I think this is the biggest benefit you could get out of having a standardized process. Because it basically means The international organization will offer you certification or accreditation to any of the standards that you choose to use. However, you get accredited to a standard or one of the ISO standards, one of the things that is going to be known the world over is it's going to come up with better business, better regulations, but of course, better products and services for the clients. So why are standards important? Besides the fact that you're going to have a standardized product and the systems are going to be the same. Of course, there are consequences for poor standards. They're disastrous, from company reputation to huge lawsuits. There are also ethical responsibilities that make standards really important. There are also issues around risk. And actually, risk is one of the things I want to discuss today. And then, of course, there is the solid supportive leaders. You need them to be able to ensure that you have good standards and your standards are continuously being improved. Then quality improvement. With standards, you actually have a target that you want to attain. And once you attain that target, or should you fall short of that target, then you are able to think about what is my performance improvement as I continue to work with the targets that I have. And so standards are just so key to that regard in terms of benefits. It allows you to measure where you are. It allows you to see where you deviated, and it allows you to be able to put in place new targets for performance improvements, which actually makes the commodities and or services that you provide top-notch. But also, it reduces cost, it reduces waste, which is a very important thing. So in the big field of standards, the ISO came up with what is called the management systems. And basically, management systems is the way in which the organization manages the interrelated parts of its businesses. There are many moving parts in every business, that all achieve different sets of objectives. But what the management systems do is they allow all your moving parts to be able to come to objectives. And when we talk about objectives to a number of different topics, when we talk about objectives of different topics, these include products or services, service quality, operational efficiency. And there is environmental performance. There is a standard 14,001 on the environment. That's a pretty new standard. It just came around in the 20s. And then there is the health and safety in the workplace. These are important standards for us to be able to look at because they tie into risk and they also tie into performance. So what's the benefits of effective management systems? Because all of these come together. It allows you to be more efficient, a more efficient use of your resources, improve financial performance. And I don't know of any business that is not inclined to look at the bottom line. The bottom line is always very important. And these are one of the big gains that you get when you come with an ISO standard or when you have a proper management system. And we're going to look at some management systems down the line. But it increases the capability to deliver consistently. You want your clients to be sure that should they come to you, I just take a restaurant, for example. If you went out to a restaurant and you had a great meal and you really love that meal, you want to be able to come back to the exact same meal. You want the consistency to be there. You want the deliverable to be the same. You don't want to come back and hear, oh, we changed our chef. And that's why the soup is no longer tasting the same way. No, you want to come back to the same consistent delivery. So in the ISO management systems of standards, what you have here is improve performance by specifying repeatable steps. What are the repeatable steps in the activity that the organization has to perform? How do we ensure that we keep them as specific as possible? Create an organizational culture. That's what you get when you do the ISO systems of standards. You create an organizational culture where people know what is expected. There is a cycle of self-evaluation that is built into the system. Correction, improvement of operations happens. And all of this behind a standard. Because with the standard, regardless of which standard it is, then there is a clear, specific way of the repeatable steps. And then you could train staff, you could train employees, so that each of them knows how the repeatable steps are going to be performed. But then, of course, almost all the standards always ask for, they have a leadership component. And basically, the leadership component What are they asking for? They're asking for commitment from leadership, from the leadership of the organization. So just as by way of an example of management system standards and related standards, I just threw in these are pretty common standards in today's market, the 9001 quality management systems requirements. And post the lockdown in a lot of countries with the coronavirus, what we've seen now is a lot of people have had to go work remotely. And so information technology has become really key as people work remotely. So of course, security techniques, so there is the ISO behind that, ISO 27001. And then of course, I mentioned earlier, environmental management system, ISO 14001. So this just by way of an example. There are other sector-specific examples like 13,485 for medical devices. Basically looking at the quality management systems in medical devices, ensuring that they perform the way they're supposed to perform every time through every step of the activity. Railway, yes, there is a standard around railways, 22,163 allows for application, the management systems, the business management, and then 29,001 for the petroleum industry. So in the petroleum industry, there are few standards around that, but the management system around the petroleum industry is the 29,001. Deals with natural gas industries as well. So looking at the management system standards and the other related standards, just to throw in this one as implementation guides, because there are standards and then there are a number of guides that are out there. There is the 22,003 for food safety. This is very important. You go to a restaurant, you have a good meal, you don't want to end up with any kind of stomach upset. So the restaurants would go into trying to become certified to 22,003, or guidelines around quality management system documentation. And then, of course, this is one of the big ones, the 19,011, which provides guidelines for auditing management systems. So you have all these management systems that are out there, but you could not just audit them randomly. There is a clear guideline on how to audit management systems. People have to be trained around these guidelines. People have to practice around these guidelines. And then you have to be trained on 19,011 in conjunction with the management system that you're going to audit in, so that you are actually going to audit the system with the right background knowledge of the system that you're supposed to be auditing. Then going forward, we looked at some management standards, the 26,001 on social responsibility. That's been a very big thing in the advent of COVID. There's been a lot of social responsibility, but there is also a standard around social responsibility. There is a standard around risk management as people prepare to go back to work. And this slide is just a fact check slide. There's 1.6 million valid certificates were recorded across 9 standards in 2015. That's a huge increase. It says 8% increase. Then I mentioned earlier that the International Organization for Standardization does not offer certification, nor does it offer accreditation to its standards. You'll have to get a conformity assessment body to be able to do that. So we speak here about conformity assessment involves a set of processes that show that your product, service, or system meets requirements of a standard. And again, and we just saw a few minutes ago, 253 different technical committees producing hundreds of standards periodically. So there are sets of processes that need to be adhered to. Provides customers, consumers, and other stakeholders with added confidence to what is going on. Gives your company a competitive edge. And that's why, just like we just saw in a few seconds ago, in the previous slide, there's been an 8% jump in the number of certified companies between 2015 and 2016, almost 1.6 million. And then, of course, it helps regulators to ensure that health, safety, or environment conditions are met. Because if you're certified to one of the standards, it means you've actually ensured that you've put a lot of processes in place. So talking about conformity assessments, there is the certification process, which I mentioned earlier on. There is testing as well. Determination of one or more of an object or product characteristics. That's what happens with testing. And then there is inspection. So you have three different things that are going on here. There is certification, there is testing, and then there is inspection. Then certification and accreditation. Accreditation, the formal recognition by an independent body, which in this case will not be the International Organization for Standardization, generally known as an accreditation body, that a certification body operates according to the international standards. And these are the standards that we just referred to. And then there is certification provision by an independent body of written assurance that the product, service, or system in question meets specific requirements. So these are two very important things that happen. And a lot of the business market today is using International Organization for Standardization standards to be able to meet either accreditation or certification. So talking about the standards that are out there, there are basically two classes of them. And there is what we call the high-level structure of standards. And within the high-level structure of standards, basically what it does here is you find out that they have certain processes that have all been boxed into. Most of the high-level structures all have 10 clauses that they satisfy, starting from the scope all the way through to performance improvement. And then, so with all of this happening, a lot of companies, depending on their complexities, have tried to come up with integrated standards. So they've pulled together. I'll give you, for example, in our case, if you just look to the bottom left of the slide, it tells you that we are certified to 9001. We're also certified to 14001, and we're also certified to 45001. So basically what we've done with these three different levels of certification is we've built an integrated standard system. So what you have is you get one audit that satisfies our certification to all three standards. So basically in the integrated system, you have chapters. Chapter 1 describes the fundamentals of the management system. Chapter 2 of your integrated system will describe the structure and content of your system. And step 3 describes how an organization integrates the requirements of multiple management systems. This is really the crux to the system here. So you take our case, for example, we have 9001, we have 14001, and we have 45001. When we get to chapter 3 of the integrated system, we have to laboriously explain how these different systems actually integrate. So these are multiple management systems, and how do we pull them together? So basically, again, ISO has a document. ISO actually has a guide document that actually allows you to be able to come up with an integrated management system. And in the chapter 1 of that document, it talks about what are the systems. It talks about the components of those systems, and then it looks at the relationship. In chapter 2, it talks about the foundation of it, the purpose and the objectives. Then, of course, it talks about its application, relationships to the management system standards. And the last one is chapter 3, where it talks about how do you actually prepare an integrated management system standard. So you're going to be working with at least 2 and more different management systems. How do you connect those systems? How do you incorporate them? And then finally, how do you sustain them so that you're able to run them as a single system? Because basically an integrated management system of standards basically says you've taken multiple management systems and you're now actually running them as a single system. So I just threw in a list of the 21 high-level structured documents, and I just put in a list here for general review. These are not all 21 of them, but there are 91 management system standards that are out there, and of the 91, 21 of them are high-level structured standards, which basically, high-level structures, which basically says they have the same 10 clauses starting from their scope all the way to performance improvement. So I just want to take a few minutes and talk about occupational health and safety during and post COVID-19. And again, this is one of the standards that is out there, that's the 45,000. And just thinking about it up front, I should have actually paused on this slide. Here we're looking at something really simple, and we're talking about fatalities. Top 5 workplace fatalities by injury. You look at transportation is a big one, 40%. Sleep, trips, and falls, 17%. Violence, top 5 workplace fatalities, violence, 16%. Exposure to harmful substances or the environment, 10%. And then when you look at the top 5 occupational occupations, top 5 occupations with the highest number of fatalities. I guess everybody could guess on this one. Drivers, farmers in the ranch, roofers, people putting up roofs, aircraft pilots and flight engineers. These are some of the top ones there. So talking about, just to give you a quick look into 45001, and then of course the benefit and why the ISO 45001. But again, just to throw this in, there was a migration from what used to be called as OSHA 18001 to the ISO 45001, and every facility or every business that was using OSHA 18001 was expected to have completely transitioned to ISO 45001 by March 11th of 2021. So that's about a year behind us now. According to ISO, every 15 seconds, a worker dies from a health-related accident or disease. So this is where the occupational health standard becomes really important and beneficial. Each day, more than 7,600 people die as a result of work-related activities. Each day, 7,600 people. And each year, 370 million accidents occur on the job. Occur on the job. So, because it helps the employer look at how, it basically helps the employer work with the employees to be able to ensure their own safety, consumer expectations, economic savings, reduce liability. Liability is a very big thing. Then, of course, he talks about brand reputation. And in this slide, I just basically was doing a comparison between the OSHA 18001 and ISO 45001, and what stayed and what was removed. Basically, the plan, do, check, and adjust stayed for the 45001. And again, because it's a high-level structured document, you have all the other elements, of course, operational in the standard. Important notice for as people move between the OSHA 18001 and the ISO 45001. What you see here is what was actually retained in the ISO 45001. What was actually removed here was the management representative, which was a requirement in OSHA, was removed. No manuals required for ISO, and the preventive actions as well was not mandatory. Which, and then just as a side note for OSHA, I said earlier on that it expired just a year and a few months ago. And all organizations that were certified to OSHA 18001 have had to move their certification to the ISO 45001. But this is the real question that has to be asked when you're talking about occupational health and safety. And with people working from home now, there is actually more of this than we actually think. There is stress, there is fatigue, there are deadlines that have to be met, and people are overworked. I just tell you, for example, I don't know how many conference calls I have to be on. I'm on conference calls from 6 a.m., 5 a.m. some days in the morning, because I have clients in different parts of the world, and I go on conference calls all the way till 11 p.m. Yes, it's going to create fatigue, and that's one of the things that the new normal is bringing to us these days. So there has to be this work-life balance that allows you to not end up like the picture we have in front of us. But this is a very important thing to think about, especially as we are walking and navigating around COVID today, is the hierarchy of control. The hierarchy of control basically says we have occupational health and safety issues that we need to look at. How do we ensure that the workplace is actually safe for the employees that we have? And basically what you have here is you start from the bottom and you go to the top. Basically you provide protective equipment for the staff, protect the workers with protective equipment. Then you could put in administrative controls, procedures, policies, change the way people work. Then you could come up with some kind of engineering, isolate people from the hazard. A very common example I could give you today, at our offices at the Global Healthcare Public Foundation, we had a biometric access. But what we had to do with the advent of COVID was we changed our biometric access to a key card system. So you don't have to place your thumb and pick up particles of the virus. You could just flash your card at the same entry system and have access to the workplace. Replace the hazard, perfect one again, or eliminations, physically remove the hazard. In the case of COVID, we cannot physically remove COVID, so we have to be able to exercise a number of controls to ensure that we stay safe. Return to work, lots of places have now returned to work, and there are a number of things in the occupational and health and safety area that need to be looked at. Account for factors outside of your control. Staff still have to be transported to work. Some of them have to use public transport. We need to think about that. Determine who needs to come back so that the space is actually allows for social distancing. Prepare people, policies, and protocol for how people would actually return to work. And I threw in this slide again because it looks at fatalities by gender. And I don't know why, but men are just more prone to having fatalities. You have the male, you have 4,700 versus 386 to female. And then when you look at fatalities by age, 55 to 64, 1,155. That's a pretty big jump there. But again, they're a little slower, if I may say that, at that age. And 45 to 54, 1,059. And then you come down to 65 and older. Yeah, there are not many of them in the workplace, but they're more diligent. Again, 755 of them in that bracket. But talking about the return to work, which is where we were, there needs to be some kind of flexibility as to what is going to happen, how you're going to use the space you have, access building preparedness. Staff are coming back. What is going to happen in terms of the natural flow of the air in the space? How is it going to be controlled? How is sanitation going to work? And then there is the pay close attention to restrooms and pantry facilities. That's a really big thing because you're going to have staff, multiple staff using the same pantries, using the same restroom, and we need to pay attention to those kinds of things. Prepare for contact tracing. Your staff are going to be involved. Build trust through transparency. Again, this is a leadership issue. The leaders have to ensure that they're as transparent as possible and get as much information to the staff as possible. And then leverage long-term telework. Involve your workplace strategy. Don't have the same people working from home for too long. They might lose sense of the company's structure or the company's culture. So you want to be able to make sure that you rotate the work from home staff. This slide basically talks about elimination of hazards within the occupational health and safety. I wouldn't delve too much into this. Some of the basic facts: approximately 56% of the US workforce found out that their jobs could be done remotely. So there are going to be more people working from home. And here, this slide actually looks at our risk management, and that's the ISO 31000. The ISO 31000 is a very important standard as most businesses open today and come back to work because they have to do a basic risk evaluation. Effect of uncertainty on objectives has to be looked at. And this is risk and compliance. We're basically looking at how two sets of things are interchangeable. There is productivity, there is efficiency, there are the margins that we have to make as a business, there is growth and profits. But then on the other hand, you need to think about sustainability, the reputation of the company, what is the quality of service and the products that you're going to put out. Then safety and trust, what do the clients think about your about your product and of the service that you deliver. So then this year we look at the risk stages because the standard ISO 31000 looks at different things here. Do you have and can we keep staff? Shall we close? These are the basic risk questions that management has to look at in terms of coming from a management crisis point or a risk management point. What risk really matters? What risk can you buy down? What risk requires mergers? And then there is the change management, of course. Once you've identified what are the risks in your system, you come up with a risk matrix, you have an impact, and you know what is going on, then you have to think about the change management for that. And again, the communication and consolation is basically just filters what happens in the risk process. Then you have to establish a context. Then you do the risk identification within the context. Then there is risk analysis, risk evaluation. Then the risk treatment. Risk treatment is very important. And then all of that has to be monitored against your target. And in this slide, sorry, basically I use the pandemic again because we still have COVID around with us. So we came with a pandemic and then we went into a shutdown, and then there's been huge impact from the shutdown. Again, we need to identify the risk in our different places, analyze those risks, look at the evaluations, and then we have to make a determination whether that's an acceptable risk or is a risk we can avoid, or is if it's not acceptable, then we have to have a response to that risk. And basically, this is what a lot of businesses have had to go through. So there used to be what we call the old normal. Everything was standard and there was an order. But then the pandemic came and now we have to reimagine. But for us to be able to reimagine properly, we need to go through the ISO 31000 and do a risk management. And basically in that whole place, I call it the chaos shutdown. And then there are issues of compliance. There's also a standard for compliance, 19,600. Between ISO 31000 and ISO 19,000, there was total chaos. But with that chaos, if you follow the standards, and that's the beauty of the standards, then we're able to emerge with a new normal, which takes you into a new order. And then we look at the risk context, basically external or internal, looking at external stakeholders, what is happening with the government, international environment, versus do we have the right staff for the current situation? What is our approach to government, to governance? What is the culture that we maintain at this point? And on this slide here, again, this just looks at the transition between March 11, when we came up with the pandemic and there was the lockdown. March 11 was a magic date. Most of the countries on the African continent started shutting down somewhere in the last week of February. But by March 11, almost everybody was shut down. And then there's a huge impact. But again, as businesses, there has to be a look into what actually happens. Then there are levels of uncertainty for the different things as they happen. There are minor levels, business assumptions are valid. Moderate levels, significant changes to business. And then of course, there is the major part, business assumptions no longer valid. This is where the risk management, risk assessment, and the risk standard becomes really important. When your business assumptions are no longer valid, what are you going to be able to do? Some key questions that businesses have to look at as they prepare for, as they do their risk assessment and risk management. What is their destination? Do they have a plan? Do they have enough resources? What are the progresses that they have in place? And what new risk would they have to deal with? That's an old slide. And usually I never want to end one of these webinars without continuing to remind you that we still have COVID. It's still very much with us. So I ask you to continue to watch your temperatures. Please wash your hands for at least 20 seconds with running water and soap. Sanitize in the absence of running water and soap. And above all, wear a face mask. But all of these four things together does not remove you from maintaining a good social distance. We need to continue to observe this. Compliance is very important. ISO 19,600 compliance is going to help us to be able to curb the COVID-19. So I welcome you. Please ask a few questions if you have any questions. make a few suggestions if you do have. At this point, I will take your questions. Or you could also go to the comment section. You could go to the comment section and you could type in a question or remark, and I should be able to read it here and give you a quick, nice answer. Thank you again. Thank you so very much indeed for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you. And should you have any questions to do with standards, implementing standards, developing a management system for your organization, please do not hesitate to reach out. That's what we do. We work on standards, all the 21 management systems, we could help you with them. If you have any other standards, we are the go-to place to help you implement your standards. So welcome. I look forward to questions or comments from anybody who has some comments based on the presentation. Just go into the chat box and your Q&A and just type in, and I will try to answer them from here. Or just stick your hand up and wave at me, and we sure could call you to talk to us. Thank you. I know I literally ran through this. There is so much that can be said on the International Organization for Standardization and the integrated standards and the management systems of standards and the over 253 technical committees that are out there. I know I literally ran through that, but should you have any comments, questions, please, this is your turn. Just take a stab at it right now. Hello. There might be somebody who wants to speak. Just go on and unmute your microphone. If you unmute your microphone, I'll be able to hear you. Or alternatively, just go in the Q&A session and type in your question or comment, and I'll be very glad to read it out. Usually I come to an end just about, and then just when I'm saying thank you and goodbye, there is usually one. So I'm going to give it an extra 1 whole minute for somebody who is holding back a good thought. Please share your thoughts. We enjoy listening to you.
Hello, Prof. Good afternoon.
Yes. I hear a squeaky there. Somebody is trying to come on.
Yes, I have a question. How can organizations understand the importance of having their systems accredited?
By the way, may I please, who is speaking, please? Where are you calling from?
This is Clinton, calling from Kampala.
Oh, Clinton, yes. And the question was, how could organizations do what? What was that again?
How can organizations understand the need to have their systems accredited?
One of the many things that could happen, because I know the International Organization for Standardization is kind of sort of remote. In Uganda, you're calling from Kampala. In Uganda, there is the Uganda National Bureau for Standards. That's a place where people in Uganda could actually get information around standards. One of the other things that they could do is, hey, just look us up. You could look us up, a Global Healthcare Public Foundation. You could call us, you could drop out an email, and we'll be very glad to give your company a talk on the importance of standardization. And at the very beginning of my presentation, I actually mentioned that the International Organization for Standardization actually went out of its way, and it actually is developing as one of its strategy an action plan for developing countries. And I think that is a phenomenal idea. With one of the big impact things there is to look at the economy and to look at the environment in which developing countries are going to be working in. I think that is just phenomenal because it's going to help the markets. It's going to help the markets. And so different organizations, different countries, we are as a global healthcare in almost 15 different countries. And so we'll be glad to work with you in any of your countries, do a sensitization program for your organization. And then if the need be, we could train you and get you certified, present you to the appropriate certification body or accreditation body for accreditation or certification. Well, thank you so very much indeed, Clinton. I don't see anybody in the chat room. I don't see anybody's hand up. So please, thank you so very much indeed. And we would see you next week. Have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you so much for joining us and looking at the role of standards and the International Organization for Standardization.